So Moses instructs us to fear the Lord, follow his commands, and then love him and love others as well. This progression from fear to love seems, to me at least, counterintuitive. After all, we typically avoid things and people that we fear. However, Moses' directive is to fear the Lord your God. It suggests that fear is not without purpose. The key to transitioning from fear to love is our willing obedience to follow his commandments. My eldest child once asked me, "Dad, why should I be afraid of God?" An excellent question. The fear of God is not servile. In other words, it's not the fear a slave would have for a cruel master. It is a healthy fear, one of a caring and loyal child. A fear of disappointing their beloved father. It is not about trembling in terror, it's more about having a deep respect, reverence for God's authority, and the desire to please him. Now, I feared my dad because I respected him and didn't want to disappoint him. This fear kept me from doing things that I knew he would not approve of. Fear of God is like this respect, but it's the honor due to our earthly father, yes. But it is much more than that. It is reverence, worship, and adoration due to God, our loving Father. It is this reaction to God alone that God alone deserves from us. So I have a fear of snakes. I think it's because snakes are really creepy. They slither along the ground and show up when you least expect it. Well, Teresa, my wife, and I were newlyweds, and we're visiting the Whitman Museum in Walla Walla, Washington. We were walking along the path up towards a monument, and suddenly a giant snake slithered out in front of us at our feet. Well, I jumped and propelled myself out of there without touching the ground, leaving my bride behind to fend for herself. As you can imagine, Teresa will never forget it, or let me forget it. Well, I didn't know the snake. The snake chose to make itself known to us all of a sudden, without warning. I had every reason to be fearful, right? My reaction was justified. And the snake certainly didn't deserve the fear of a loyal child, reverence, worship, and adoration. The snake doesn't love me. God loves us and makes himself known to us in a way that our fear of him brings us to honor and adore him. God knew us before when he said, "Let there be light." God knew us before he created all things, before time even began. Although you would not expect your child to reverence, adore, and worship you, our fear of God is a posture of servitude we owe God. We do not owe our parents reverence, worship, and adoration, but we owe God. We are commanded to love and honor him after all. Almost a synonym for this fear of God is faith. The faith in the perfection of God and his will that motivates the essential prayer that is at the heart of all authentic religions, "Thy will be done." It is the very posture we take before the Lord in homage, bowing genuflecting, kneeling, lying prone, as we recognize who God is and who we are. And we can honestly say with all sincerity, thy will be done. In other words, I surrender and accept all you have in store for me in this life. Once we adopt this posture of surrender and acceptance before God, we go from thy will be done to keeping his commandments in obedience. Obedience and faith are linked. Faith is a belief in the mind and fidelity to the will in act of obedience. Faith, although a gift from God, is a choice, an act, a deed. We have a great example in the 11th chapter of Hebrews of faith lived in action. A list, a roll call, if you will, of the great men and women of faith of Old Testament times. And identifies the faith of each with their acts of obedience. It tells what their faith did, and that it is impossible to please God without faith. Here are a couple of examples. By faith, Abraham received the power to generate offspring with a sterile wife, Sarah. By faith, Abraham offered up Isaac when put to the test. There are many examples of faith, like Noah building the ark, Elijah, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, the apostles, and all the martyrs. Their faith naturally flowed into acts of love. Their faith was not stagnant, nor should ours be, as we keep and honor his commandments. This brings us to the central commandment. Love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. This is not about adding God as icing on the cake, but about letting him be the whole cake, the Lord of our life. You may think allowing God to control every aspect of your life is impossible, but God doesn't command the impossible. To choose to love, to strive to love, to desire to love, and to have the will to love is to love. Love is not just an emotion, but it is an act of the will built on faith. And the commitment or will to love inspires and guides our actions, just as a healthy fear of the Lord of our earthly Father does. The fear of the loyal, obedient child, not disappointing their beloved Father. So take some time and examine if you fear the Lord. Do you desire to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul? Does your faith in God naturally flow into acts of love? Do you obediently keep his commandments? Can you now see how fear of the Lord leads to love, but only through obedience and observance of his commandments? Fear of God is not an emotional avoidance response, as with the snake and me, but a fear of disappointing the one who created you and knew you before all else. A fear that leads to obedience, a posture of reverence, worship, and adoration of the one who cares and loves for you more than anything.